Ikea isn't just a furniture store, it's a global obsession. A place where 800 million people walk in every year, but only a few walk out with their wallets untouched. It's the brand that turned do-it-yourself into a billion-dollar addiction. The brand that built an empire from flat packs, meatballs, and minimalism. But behind the pastel colors and cozy showrooms lies a darker story. One filled with controversy, political scandal, tax evasion, and environmental deception. From a founder with ties to Swedish fascism, to secret offshore holdings, to a global expansion strategy that nearly collapsed in Asia, IKEA's success wasn't just about clever design, it was about controlling the narrative of modern living. This is the untold story of how IKEA became a global empire, and how it's quietly reinventing itself again, this time with AI, renewable energy, and digital design labs. The story begins in Småland, Sweden, 1943. A 17-year-old boy named Ingvar Kamprad starts selling pens, wallets, and picture frames from his bicycle. He calls his tiny business Ikea, a blend of his initials and his family farm, Elmturid, and village, Agunnaryd. From the start, Kamprad wasn't driven by design. He was driven by efficiency. He wanted to sell quality goods to ordinary Swedes at the lowest possible price. By the 1950s, IKEA began selling furniture by mail-order catalog, shipped flat to customers to save on costs. But it wasn't until 1956 that the real revolution began, when an employee unscrewed the legs from a table to fit it in a box. That simple idea, flat-pack design, would change global retail forever. It slashed shipping costs, empowered customers to assemble products themselves, and created a sense of pride. Psychologists later called it the IKEA effect, a phenomenon where people value things more when they've built them themselves. But as IKEA's reputation for innovation grew, so did questions about its founder. In the early 1990s, Swedish media uncovered Kamprad's dark past. He had been a teenage member of a pro-fascist group led by Per Engdahl, a known Nazi sympathizer. The revelation shocked the world. Kamprad was forced to issue a public apology, calling it the greatest mistake of my life. Yet instead of destroying the company, the controversies strangely humanized him. It fit perfectly into IKEA's underdog narrative, a flawed man with humble roots, constantly seeking redemption through simplicity, equality, and affordability. Kamprad's personal frugality, driving a 20-year-old Volvo, flying economy, and buying secondhand clothes, became a moral brand story. He wasn't just selling furniture. He was selling a lifestyle of restraint, humility, and order. But behind the minimalist philosophy, IKEA was building something far more complex. A corporate labyrinth of holding companies and foundations designed to protect its empire from taxes, regulation, and takeover. By the 1970s and 80s, IKEA had become one of Europe's fastest-growing retail chains, but the business structure was anything but simple. At the top sat a non-profit foundation in the Netherlands, ostensibly created to promote design innovation, but in reality, it served as a legal shield, helping IKEA avoid billions in taxes across Europe. In 2017, the European Commission launched a formal investigation, alleging IKEA had dodged up to €1 billion in taxes through Dutch profit-shifting schemes. It was a classic corporate paradox. The world's most accessible brand was run through one of the least transparent corporate networks on Earth. Yet IKEA's customers never cared, because IKEA wasn't selling transparency. It was selling control. Control over your home, control over your space, control over your lifestyle. And in a world of chaos, that was priceless. But while Europe fell in love with IKEA's model, not every country did. When IKEA entered Japan in 1974, it flopped. Japanese homes were too small for bulky Western furniture, and the culture didn't embrace the idea of self-assembly. People didn't want to build their own sofa. They wanted it delivered, pre-assembled. By 1986, IKEA pulled out entirely. The same thing nearly happened in India decades later, where IKEA's 2018 launch faced intense backlash for poor localization, long shipping delays, and expensive imported materials. For a brand built on cultural universality, IKEA discovered that minimalism doesn't always translate. Still, Kamprad's creation endured, because IKEA's design wasn't just about furniture. It was about feelings. Every showroom was a psychological maze, designed to make customers feel at home, relaxed, and inspired. Each room was staged like a mini movie set of your ideal life. Even the Swedish meatballs weren't random. They were placed strategically to keep shoppers inside longer, triggering comfort and nostalgia before the checkout line. Ikea wasn't a store, it was a social experiment in human behavior. And it worked. By the late 2000s, Ikea wasn't just a retail success, it was a cultural institution. With over 300 stores across 40 countries and annual revenue surpassing $35 billion, Ikea had turned affordable design into a global religion. From a small mail-order catalog in 1943 to one of the most beloved global brands, Ikea's story is more than a business case. It's a story about vision, adaptation, and the quiet power of simplicity. It's about how a company built on flat-pack furniture became a blueprint for resilience. How it faced scandals, recalls, and recessions, and still came out stronger. And perhaps how it proved that in the end, you don't need to be perfect to be loved. You just need to keep building.